We spend about $200 billion a year in cybersecurity today, in products, not even in people and services. That's another multiple of that. And if you just look at what's spent today, the vast majority of the money is spent on infrastructure security. And infrastructure means we're protecting our networks, our devices, our clouds. And when you think about that, those are all the things that most organizations rent. There's no terminal value, there's no differentiation, right? Your cloud or your Salesforce or Workday or any of these SaaS apps, it's the same as your competitors. What makes companies successful ultimately? It's their data. It's the only thing with terminal value. And when you think about how much we're spending on securing the data, it's a very small fraction of the overall cyber budget. And when you try to zoom out and think about, well, how do I compare that to the physical real world? Well, I don't think anyone buys homeowners insurance for the Airbnb that they rent or the hotel that they stay in, right? They spend that on the asset that they own, which is their own home, their own property. And it's a really interesting dynamic where in the real world, we spend our cybersecurity or our security budget on the things we own. But in the IT world, we spend most of our budget on the things that we rent. I don't think this is going to persist. I think there's going to be a big shift in spending from infrastructure security to data-centric security models and products and solutions. And I think when that happens, there are going to be massive winners created. So DLP stands for data loss prevention. And I think the first thing to recognize is that that's not even the right concept. It's not about loss prevention because data has risk if it flows in the wrong hands, even when it's not lost or leaves your company. Imagine a public company that has earnings data and it goes to the wrong person inside the company. That presents risk to the company and the data wasn't lost. So I think even starting with the notion of loss prevention is the wrong way to think about it. I think we need to think about risk to our data and managing that risk. So we're sitting here in March of this year right now. In the US, we're going into tax season. And what happens during tax season? Most employees on a corporate machine are going to download their W-2, which is their annual earnings statement. They're going to email it to their spouse or partner or accountant on a personal email address, and all the DLP alarms will trip because they're over-indexed on what the data is, which is PII. They don't understand, the traditional products don't understand that this use case or this flow of data is not risky to the corporation. So they can't distinguish the context by which the data is being used. And that's the biggest problem. Accuracy is probably the biggest problem. A second big problem, I think, is the maintenance of all these products. It's very signature based, meaning organizations are constantly writing rules to try to identify the sensitive data that they have as their business grows, evolves, they acquire new businesses, they get into new products or services. They have to constantly tune these regular expressions, as we call them. So they're basically like rules about what kind of data we're watching. And there's a ton of maintenance keeping these policies and expressions, regular expressions, up to date. The only way that you can identify the broad real estate of data is you have to look beyond what it is, and you have to understand how the data is used and other contexts like what application did it come from and things like that. So that's where data lineage comes in. I think we marry the content with the context, and it gives us much broader and more accurate classification. It gets us much better risk detection, and we believe it's a transformative approach to data protection programs. Linear AI is basically a foundational model that we built that has been trained on the billions of flows that we've seen. And what we do with those is we predict how data should move inside an organization based on all of the other data movements that we've seen. So let's say, for example, that you're in a annual review cycle, and the head of the HR organization or the person that handles all the compensation and benefits sends all the salary data to one of the HR business partners that supports a function of the company, let's say the sales team. Well, we know from watching other companies in their annual review process that the likelihood of the next action should be 22% of the time that HR business partner is going to send that spreadsheet with all the salaries back to the compensation and benefits team, maybe with some adjustments and recommendations. 30% of the time, that HR business partner will share that information with the head of the function, the VP of the sales function in this case. And then 0.02% of the time, she would take a screenshot of that data and then put it on Signal. What the lineage model is mapping out or predicting is every next action on data based on all the actions that we've seen by that individual user and on that specific piece of data, and we compare it to all the similar kinds of flows that we see across other companies, and we make predictions. When we see an action or an event that it is very low probability, we trigger it as an incident. And so this technology has the ability to basically automatically classify and understand what data is sensitive, and then also detect risk in ways that were never possible before. I think it's a complete game changer.